All right, let's just go ahead and quickly review our lesson for next week. Of course, it is Super Bowl Sunday, so you might introduce that, make sure everybody knows that we're going to be having a tailgate event after the service.
I got cheerleaders for my class.
Do you? That should turn people off.
I'll tell Doug Bolton that you said that.
I don't, you go get personal now. Well, in our lesson for next week, we're looking at the story of Joseph, where he is given special revelations from God. And you remember he has two special dreams, all right? What made Joseph special to Jacob?
Rachel.
All right, yeah, no question about it. The main reason was he was the first son born to his favorite wife, Rachel. And so, but Jacob made no bones about it, with Joseph being his favorite above all the other boys. And so what was the response of the brothers?
Hate.
Jealousy.
Yeah, in fact, in this context, it says that they hated him because of the jealousy of it. They knew their dad had given special attention to Joseph. And and what was the special attention that we know about?
Coat.
Yeah, of course, the special coat. But beyond that then, when Joseph reveals these dreams, it says that they hated him even more. Okay? So that's going to be the focus of the lesson, and then how it ends up turning as the brothers decide, we're not going to have this young boy to rule over us. And so, and really the way we're developing it is just three questions. And the first one is, rule over us? You know, and it has to do with the dreams that God gave Joseph. Do you remember what the dreams were? Just somebody give me a summary.
Stars.
Okay, the second dream involved 11 stars and
Sun and the
the
moon.
sun and the moon, which every one of them understood immediately. That meant the 11 brothers and mom and dad, right? Keep in mind, who is the mom in this situation?
Leah.
Mary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rachel.
Rachel's already died.
Yeah.
And she died they were en route, and she died near Bethlehem.
Was it Mary?
Different Joseph.
Bill.
Yeah, read your story. But when Jacob will later say, oh, does this mean you're going to rule over me and your mother? It's probably in reference to Leah, who at that point would have probably assumed the role. Okay, what was the other dream?
Wicked stepmother.
I didn't say anything about that. Wicked stepmother. What?
The shoes all bald.
Yes. His first dream was this, they were harvesting, they were bundling these harvested grains into bundles. And of course, we know that sheaves would have been what bundles were called. And Joseph explains, my sheaf stood up, and all of yours stood up too, and then paid obeisance, bowed down to my sheaf. Well, the 11 brothers had no problem identifying what that meant. This could only be one thing, and that was that you're going to be over us. Yeah, right. Okay? So that sets the stage for how this unfolds. And so on the second page there, I do want to point out that when God gave the second dream to Joseph and he shared it, what was Jacob's response upon hearing the dream?
He chided a little bit.
He did. And it was basically, yes, that's the thing I want to make sure you notice in verse 11. Because it says, but his father observed the saying. So even though Jacob rebuked Joseph for being public with these dreams, and he even said, "You mean you're going to rule over me and your mother?" But then it does say that his father observed the same. It's kind of the same idea of Mary in the New Testament pondering these things. Because Jacob knew the power of dreams. He himself had experienced dreams. And so he wasn't ruling out the possibility that God might be doing something special here. But at that point, his initial response was to rebuke Joseph for sharing this dream. They hated him the more, it says verse 5. All right. Why do you think Jacob might have rebuked Joseph for sharing the dreams?
What's good politics?
Okay, yeah, correct. Yeah, it was not. In fact, that's part of the question that we're going to delve with in the lesson is the wisdom of whether or not Joseph should have shared. Now, why did Joseph share it? Why do you think he shared the dreams publicly? That's what I think too. He was excited. I think he had these dreams. He may or may not have fully understood the implication of sharing them. But I think, let me tell you, I think God revealed to me. All right, yeah.
I was going to say, Jacob kind of created that culture by his favoritism.
Exactly. Jacob was concerned about him sharing it because he understood this is not going to be more popular with the boys if I've already shown this favoritism, which, by the way, Jacob had experienced in his own parents. Now he undiscerningly makes clear his favorite. And then for Joseph to publicly share the dreams, I think Jacob recognized this is just getting worse. And clearly the way the other boys responded, they hated him the more, but they couldn't say a nice thing about him. And that's in the text too. They could hardly speak a civil word towards Joseph. All right? So then we jump down into verses 19 to 24. And this is, the question is, what happens to your dreams now? Because this is the part of the story where the brothers who have developed such an animosity and hatred towards their brother, they see him coming a long way off. He's come up to check on them and see how they're doing and wants to report back to Dad. How do they know it's Joseph a long way off? Yeah, his neon Technicolor coat is shining a long way off, right?
Armani, wasn't it?
What?
Armani.
Armani, was it? Okay. But what was it that they decided? As they see him coming across the countryside, what conversation takes up?
Let's kill him.
Well, that was
Yes,
pretty
very
pointed.
Escalated.
All right. They start this idea of getting even with the boy by, let's just eliminate him. Which one speaks caution to that idea?
Reuben.
All right. Well, why Reuben?
He's the oldest.
Reuben is the oldest of all of the brothers of Leah. All right, all of that grouping. And Reuben may have taken a little bit more responsibility as the older one, kind of maybe feeling some responsibility for all of the little brothers. But he's the one that first says, no, let's take our time on this and make sure we're going to make a good decision. So he suggests, let's not kill him, let's just take him and put him into this pit. All right? And the description is it's a cistern. It's a dried up, because it says it had no water in it, which would have been the purpose of a cistern. And so Joseph is in there, and you'll notice my first bullet under point number 2, when we talk about how did Joseph feel? How do you think Joseph felt after his brothers accosted him and threw him in this pit?
I don't think they like me.
Okay, it's probably come very vividly to his attention This is not going well.
Maybe I should have kept my mouth shut.
Of course, it never says that, but you wonder if that crossed his mind. Is that what? Careful.
Just fear.
Yeah, there's no question. He had to be fearful. He had to be confused. What would one of the questions in his mind be now that they had thrown him in the pit and probably in all practicality had threatened to kill him already? They just hadn't done it.
Questioning God.
I certainly think he questioned whether or not any of those dreams could ever possibly come true now. At least for a time, you know that he wondered, how could any of this possibly come true now because of this? Of course, they've taken the coat off. I did include, because we read in Genesis 42, after Jacob's dead, they buried him. No, I'm sorry. It's before Jacob comes down to Egypt. But they are talking when Joseph has been rough with them about buying the food and stuff. And they're talking among themselves. And you remember, they said, remember, this is all happening to us because of the way we treated Joseph. And we remember his pleadings. And we remember his deep distress. Those are words in Genesis 42. And so all those many years later, they didn't even recognize Joseph. But they remembered that incident, and they're still talking about how that made them feel and how it must have made Joseph feel being that. And then, again, Reuben intervenes and tries to rescue them. One other thing about Reuben, don't forget that one of the things that Reuben may wanted to keep from hurting his dad anymore was the fact that Reuben had already sinned against his father with Bilhah. All right? And so that's referenced there in chapter 35. Okay, and then we just conclude with the last couple thoughts. What do we gain? Do you remember what did they gain when they saw the Ishmaelite caravanners going by and they decided, hey, let's not kill him, let's sell him?
20 pieces of silver.
20 pieces of silver. And of course, that was really not a lot. But at least we're going to get something out of this. And so, who was it that suggested they do that? Judah. Yes. And I find the story of Judah really interesting. In fact, we're going to skip over chapter 38 with Judah involved. But what's the deal with Judah? What do we know about Judah as far as his line that will ultimately come out of Judah?
His daughter-in-law, he has a relationship
Right.
with her.
Right.
And the twins are born.
Right? Good. But what else? Even further down, do we see about Judah? He's the line of the kings, David, and ultimately the Messiah. And yet, Judah's got some character flaws, which I guess just once again speaks to the fact that God can use everybody in his plan. But Judah's the one that suggests, hey, let's sell him. Reuben apparently isn't there when all that discussion goes on. But in any event, what happens is, how much did it cost them? How much did they gain? Well, they gained 20 pieces of silver. But what I want to conclude with is they gave Jacob a heartache for life. I mean, they didn't, maybe they thought if they eliminated Joseph, maybe he would show some favoritism towards them. None of that ever happened. In fact, it destroyed Jacob. And he lamented and grieved over Joseph's alleged death for decades. And that is part of the insidious thing that happened in this. And for sake of time, we'll close there, but I just want to remind you, kind of the takeaway from this is that we should not be jealous of other people. We should not be unhappy when other Christians get promoted. We should rejoice with those that rejoice. And it's important for us to realize that we're part of God's plan, but other people are part of God's plan too. And if God promotes them and they get the increase, then we should rejoice with those that God uses them.